today's video, I'm going to be showing you these nails that are a mix of like tropical bright colors and then some Disney thrown in. We've got all kinds of Lion King characters. I have Rafiki, Pumbaa, and Timon I'm going to be showing you in the video, but then I'll show you my other hand, which I didn't record because it's way too awkward for me to record while painting with my left hand. But we've also got Zazu, Simba, and Nala. So I've got the whole little Lion King setup. It's bright, it's colorful. I love it. I hope you guys like it as much as I do, and don't forget to click subscribe to see all my future videos as well.
So I'm going to begin by just adding some length to my nails. I'm going to start with a clear extension, just kind of making the tip a little longer, getting into the shape I want. I want these nails to have like a surprise glitter element on the underside, which I'm going to be doing within the acrylic overlay or the acrylic extension. So I've got that little thin layer of clear across my entire nail. And then after I have that kind of as my base, I'm going to take a really pretty like green and copper glitter, and I'm going to add that to the underside. I stared at my glitter options for the longest of time trying to decide which one I felt was the right answer for what to put underneath, and I kind of like the idea of it being darker so that the bright seemed brighter. So this is where we went. I'm going to now encapsulate the nail with clear acrylic to make sure that the glitter is protected, as well as adding the strength necessary for me not to hurt myself by banging my hand into something. Nail's been filed into shape, and now it has a layer base coat on it. I'm going to take some black gel and I'm going to apply that to the tip over the glitter and then fade it out. The reason for that is so that none of these lighter, brighter colors show through the glitter if there's any gaps. And then to cover up the black, I'm going to add a layer of white gel on top. So it's masking over the top of the black. Now going into the art on the surface, I've got pink and orange, and I'm going to take these two colors and create a little ombre, applying the pink from cuticle half and then from half to tip with orange, and then going back through and doing a second coat. The gels I'm using are from Madam Glam pretty much for everything here, and I'm going to just use a sponge to blend them together. If the ombre isn't flawless, I don't really mind because there's going to be so much art on top of it, it won't show. You won't know. So on my Rafiki nail, which is my thumb, I'm going to take some white gel paint and I'm going to begin doing all of my outlines and or sketching. I guess I should call it sketching, not outlines. My first finding of everything that is going to be in here. The reason that I'm doing Rafiki in white is because he has a lot of brighter colors. He's got the white fur that kind of goes up and around his face, mane style, and so white would be less distracting if it wasn't 100% covered up than a darker color would be for him. On the other two, on Pumbaa and Timon, I'm going to use a darker color because they don't have so much light, so I'm going to use brown to do their outlines. So that is kind of something to consider when you're doing a sketch, like a little paint sketch like this, is what color is going to be both visible for you to see so you know where your lines are, and invisible at the end. So there are some considerations. Now after I have all my outlines done, I'm pretty happy with them. Around the nose, I kind of redid them a few times until they felt right. I'm going to take a light gray and I'm going to fill in all of that white fur area. Instead of going through and just blocking it all out with white, doing a darker color and then adding highlights is my preferred method, but you could always do it the opposite and do your brightest color and then add some shading. I just find that doing it this way, it looks more fur-like because you're adding the color on top and it kind of brings it out a little bit more. I'm going to fill in around his eyes with blue. I am going to do a reasonable amount of shading on all of these characters. So this first part, I am curing between each color, but I'm going to just kind of get a base color in there so that it is where it goes, and then I'll go through and I'll add details afterwards, but I want to get everything just kind of started here. A darker gray at the very top of his head, and then the area around his mouth, like his upper and lower lip, is going to be kind of a burnt yellow or like a goldenrod type of a shade, filling in all of those spaces. And then down the center of his nose, the bridge of his nose, and then his nose, a red that's not quite red, so it isn't a bright like true red, more of a like a brick red or a softer red. I'm going to use a different variation of a same kind of color inside his mouth. The palette I was using as I was painting all of these characters just was covered in little dabs of every single color I own, just about. I'm going to highlight the bridge of his nose to start that out, and then I'm going to add some shading on the opposite side and just go through. Like I said, I'm going to do quite a bit of shading all the way around this, so I'm going to just do them in sections, curing very frequently. I'm going to add some shading, darkening the blue that goes around his eyes, His eyes are sort of sunk in a little bit because he's got the really big brow bone, so that area is going to look darker. I'm going to add little stripes of the darker blue going across his cheeks, the blue portion of his cheeks, and then kind of blend that out so that it's not quite so just striped. Add some more shading on the side that is whatever side you did darker on his nose, that's the side that should be darker just overall. So that's the same area that's going to be darker on the blue areas. Add some highlights with a lighter shade of blue. So I started out with just a single color of blue, a single color of red, a single color of gray. And I did use gray. But then I'm going to add white and black gel paint to make them darker and lighter. That is a great way to simplify the process, at least to me, is to kind of mix as I go and find the color that I need instead of trying to locate each individual shade I may need in my gel polish collection. It is a lot more efficient. You have less colors to put away, especially when you've got like this blue where you need a base blue, dark blue, light blue, and possibly some shades in between to just try to grab one and then find all the colors you need from that single color. I'm going to be doing my highlighting now on the white areas, and I didn't actually go straight to white here. I actually went with a light shade of gray, a very light shade, and then I'm going to be blending it out some. I also took some darker gray and added some shading kind of in that, because there's that section of fur that goes like in front of his ear and then down the side of his face, but then under his chin, a little darker. Yellow for his eyes. I'm going to do some shading on the lip area. As I said, I'm going to do kind of section by section on this and start one area and then either finish it or get close to finishing it before I move on to the next one. I find that's easier for me because then I can cure it and I can just sort of narrow in and focus on one spot. If you try to do too much at once, especially if you're painting with gel polish, even if it looks good and you're not working right next to it, gel polish does have a tendency to move on you. So if you don't cure it often enough, even if you didn't touch it again, it may shift. So just be aware of that as you're painting. The more often that you can use a product like gel paint, the better. And even just sometimes certain gel polishes are more prone to doing that than others. So if you have a good knowledge of what your products do, but no matter what, I still recommend curing really, really often when you're working on something like this. Once you're happy with a section, go ahead and cure it because it's so easy to mess it up, whether you accidentally touch it or you twitch or your cat jumps on your lap and you jump or whatever it might be. Going to add his pupils. I added a couple more highlights onto his nose to brighten that up a little bit further. Add his teeth, little highlights on his lips. And then with some white, I'm going to be adding the rest of my highlights. And this is practically where I'm doing outlines as well. I want him to look like he's got a beautiful light source that is making certain areas of his face almost glow with a bright line. So that's nose, cheeks, eyes, brow bone, lips, hair. That's why I didn't go straight to white when I started adding some brightness to his hair, to the white area of his hair, because I wanted to reserve my bright white for the very end. Moving on to Pumbaa, we are going to just start with some of those basic areas. Like I said, I did the outlines already with brown. I did that in the beginning just to kind of get them out of the way. But I'm going to start filling in the different zones of Pumbaa. Same process, cure all the time. I do find, to me, Pumbaa was probably the hardest character on this hand to paint because he is larger. So his face is, if you compare Pumbaa to Timon, his face is huge compared to Timon. Timon can live in his hair. The reason that makes him more difficult is because there's a lot more detail lines on Timon's face than there is Pumbaa, because in drawing it and illustrating it for the movie, his face was shown so much bigger. So there's more nose wrinkles. There's just more things for him compared to Timon. And so to get all of those little lines in there and have them look appropriate and right just took a bit more. So we're going to, same process. I've got a base color across most everything. I'm going to add some highlights and on his face, because same thing, I'm trying to make the highlights very dramatic. So there's going to be those little white lines at the end. I'm going to kind of throw caution in the wind and highlight with bright lines to begin with on him, just to make it so that once I go to add those at the end, they have kind of already fallen into place. Add some darkness in his mouth, but I'm going to blend out some of these highlights a little. I'm just less concerned about it because I know it'll work itself in later. Continuing on to Pumbaa, I'm going to be adding some shading around his tusks with some dark lines now. So same process. I started out with my middle color, and then depending on kind of the moment and the mood and the character. Sometimes I'll go darker first and then lighter. In this case for him, I'm going to do the lighter highlights, cure that, and then go darker. But over the process, it all kind of just starts to blend in and it looks, layer by layer, you kind of figure it out. If you've never done any painting with gel polish or gel paint before, a thing to keep in mind is that when you've got little areas that are blended in, like right now, there's some very obvious brush strokes, like underneath the tusk. You can really see some of those dark lines. They all melt together once there's top coat applied. And everything just looks so much smoother and so much more flawless and professional after top coat is on there. So if you're ever painting something and you feel discouraged because it looks streaky or it's lumpy or whatever it is, just wait to see. And then after you apply your top coat, you're going to notice that everything just looks so much better. I'm going to do some more outlining on my Pumbaa, and because of that whole so many details, such a small canvas situation with him, as you can see, his whole face isn't there. Some ears are cut off, his chin's cut off, but also I'm going to do a little bit more exacting of outlines with a dark color, a very dark brown, just so that it's obvious what area is what. Way more, like I didn't do much for outlining on Rafiki. I'm not going to do nearly as much for outlining on Timon. Pumbaa just seemed to really require it. I'm going to apply my top coat, and after that I'm going to move on to Timon. And I top coated each one of these characters as soon as I was done with them, because I didn't want to get any fuzz in them. Once they were done, I wanted to make sure that they were protected and they were sealed. So I went ahead and I just did top coating kind of along the way. Normally when I finish or when I'm working on my nails, I just top coat them all at the end. But this set took me nearly 6 hours, actually probably longer than that, 6 hours of just the gel polish work, probably about 8 hours total. And so once I had one of them done, I wanted to make sure nothing was happening to that nail. This is the longest I've ever spent on my nails, I am certain. So yeah. There we go. I have a new record. But on Timon, same process, and start out with your base colors across everything. His hair, his little tuft of hair in between his eyes isn't nearly as noticeable on him because it's very similar to the background color, because it's like a coppery orange. So that's another spot that might require a little bit more outlining just so that it's vivid. But Timon is my favorite nail across this whole set, including the other hand. The little smirk on his face was just too much. I'm going to go through and with a darker brown, kind of begin some of those outlines, same like with around his eyes, kind of get some of those in place. Just start finding more and more of those shapes. The way that Timon is drawn also reminds me a lot of Lumiere, like the shaping of his eyes and the way he smirks, which... not that that's at all relevant to what we're doing. Just I noticed it as I was doing this. There's a lot of similar characters though. Disney has a lot of kind of repeated appearances and themes. Not that it's a bad thing when if it's not broke, don't fix it. Anywho, back to the task at hand. I'm just going to make sure everything gets its proper outlining. The reason I say proper is because you want to make sure it's outlined enough where everything is vivid and easy to see. Don't outline it too much where it becomes obnoxiously outlined. In this moment, a lot of times I do that because it's a style I'm going for. This particular moment, I'm going for a much more like softer artsy style. Timon is finished. He gets some top coat. And now for the last two nails that are on this hand. And at this point, I was ready to do a jumping jack. I was so excited that I had the characters done. I'm going to do my leaves on the index finger and on my pinky. I'm going to start out with a really big leaf, this kind of going down from the corner, not something that's going to be completely visible, kind of gets cut off. Have fun with it. And I'm going to add a smaller frond style leaf going down from the other side with just a few of the leaves, only doing 5. And then with a darker shade of green, I'm going to be adding the shading on my leaves. Again, lots of shading on this particular set. I had a vision in my head, and by golly, I was bound and determined to complete it. So there is the shading there. I'm going to do shading on the other one. After I did have the darker color, I did go through and do a little bit of highlighting with a very neon pastelish yellow. So it's bright and light, and did a great job of really enhancing the grain without taking over and making the leaves look yellow. After that, I'm going to add some highlights with white because every other nail on this set has a white highlight, so the leaves better too. Continuity. and then some top coat over those ones, and oh, sweet relief, they're done. I've got, like I said, I have Nala, Simba, and Zazu on the other hand, and I absolutely adored these. These were just my favorite. I throw some top coat on the underside of the nails too. They just had gotten a little scratched looking from when I was filing them, but that's it. They are all done, and at this point, since it had been in like an entire day, I was so relieved and so happy to finally have a finished Lion King extravaganza on my nails. I hope you guys all like them as much as I do, and don't forget to click subscribe to see all my future videos as well.